And I'm curious your take on this, because I do think sometimes people have this perception that if you don't have all the answers, people won't trust you. And so there can be this tendency to go, well, if I'm going to give a presentation or I'm going to tell a story, I have to know every single detail, because if it comes up and I don't know the answer, I will lose trust. What's been your observation, or how do you kind of help people with that? Because inevitably, I mean, I've done enough public stuff. There's going to be a curveball that comes your way times where you go,
Yeah.
I have not even considered that, type of a thing.
Yep. And I think you have to own it, right? I think the more that you own it and the faster that you own it, people do understand that. They are going to ask you questions that you don't always know the answer to or that you have not experienced. And so it is a trust building exercise to admit that and to say, I don't know. Either here are some people who might know, and I'm going to point you in their direction, or I think we don't know that as an industry. I think the worst thing to do is to try to pretend, and then you have the then you have the problem of,
Then you've got the Reddit threaders like
yeah.
all over you being like, hey, wait, yeah.
I think people underestimate though the power of humility, right? They see, for example, Taylor Swift, and you study Taylor Swift and you go, wow, she is an amazing success. She is great at harnessing that power of humility. She is great at putting herself out there in terms of saying, I don't know everything about relationships, and I'm going to let you watch me, flail at some of them in the public eye, right? She's also
Yeah.
great at very sort of tongue in cheek on her songs, talking about how, she messed things up, or in her interviews talking about, some of her biggest flub moments. And people love her. So I think understanding that people don't want to see a robot. They don't want to see something that is perfect, because in some ways that inspires more sort of feelings of jealousy or hostility. Show them that human side. It's okay. They will actually appreciate you and trust you more for doing that.
It's so funny, and that's why I wanted to see where you would go with it. But it's so funny that you bring this up, because it is that's been my experience as well. That this idea, and even with parenting, I mean, I think about being a dad to 7 kids.
Most
This
humbling
idea that
experience
being
ever.
well, but I mean, even with my kids, there is this like traditional wisdom that says you can never let your kids know that you don't know, or you make
Yeah,
mistakes, or you flubbed. And honestly, even in my own home with my kids, some of the most trust building moments have been when I've been like, I screwed that up. Like, I made a really big mistake and daddy shouldn't have done that.
yeah,
And I'm sorry. Like, I don't know what else to say. I'm not going to excuse it. I just made a mistake. And you would think that would lead to people. And I've seen the same thing in being a people leader, where you think, oh, I'm the manager now. I got to have all the answers and I better do all this. And when
yeah,
you actually come to your teams and go, I don't know. I haven't thought of that. What do you think? Like,
yeah,
what are your thoughts on that? It can actually be, to your point, a counterintuitive lesson in building trust versus breaking trust. And I feel like in the AI age, I feel like that's come out more from people, where there was the era, and I'm curious kind of the trajectory you've seen, but it seems like it used to be talking head, perfectly polished, scripted everything, like you couldn't miss a beat. And that's kind of what people expected. They kind
yeah,
of expected, like, I don't want to see anything. And with AI creating more of this almost artificial veneer of perfection, it almost seems like societally we kind of gravitate more towards, I like I like when I see the flaws and the humanity of people, because it lets me know they're real, instead of like, well, I saw this perfectly polished press conference where nothing went wrong and the lighting was perfect and their hands never moved. Is that even like a real person on the other side, or is this just an AI generated version of it? It almost seems like it's brought it out.
yeah. Well, and I do think I think it's that, but also, the effect of, we forget that COVID was not that long ago, right? And we were all at home, and we sort of all had to share more of our personal lives. So I don't know if you remember the BBC commentator who was super buttoned
I
up. You
loved it.
have probably never listened to him, and I've watched that clip of his toddler, coming in, and his, his second kid and his poor wife. I mean, I've probably watched that one 20
Oh,
times.
it's hilarious. It's like the most humanizing thing because we can all relate to it, and the fact that they're trying to pretend it's not happening is just the best part because 'cause you're like, there's
We
literally a
see you.
circus
Yeah.
going on behind you. Like, just turn around for a good second and go, "Give me 1 second,"
Yeah.
and then move on. Just don't pretend it's not happening.
Yeah. So I think that also allowed us to say, hey, we're humans, right? We have families, we have dogs, we have all these things that are part of our life. So let us try to embrace that. And we do want trusted experts, but we also want to make sure that they are real. We want to make sure that they are not, sort of the Elizabeth Holmes and everything was perfect, and that ended up being a facade. We've seen that a lot of times. So I
Yeah.
think you can't artificially create that persona, but I think by being very genuine in terms of what you don't know, and what is not your areas of capability, and also what humanizes you, people are gravitating more towards.